Okay, hi guys, and welcome back to Art Theories. This week we have a microphone, so enjoy some superior sounds. This week we're going to be talking about Lola Olufemi's book, which came out last year, Feminism Interrupted, Disrupting Power. I really enjoyed this book. It was actually recommended to me by my partner, and the whole thing was just really insightful and a really useful book for educating myself about issues which don't necessarily affect me but are very important. In the first few pages of this book, the writer explains how with neoliberalism and the kind of current form of capitalism which we live under, feminism has been pushed towards a more corporatized, individualized version of itself, which is often referred to as girl boss feminism, boss girl feminism, and that this form of feminism puts particular emphasis on getting women to the top of corporate and political ladders. And the subtext to girl boss feminism is the belief that the current system that we live under doesn't need to be overhauled, only that more women deserve a larger slice of the pie that is capitalism. And this version of feminism inevitably fails to take into account the relationship between race and class. And in this book, Olufemi offers the reader an alternative form of feminism, which she describes as radical feminism. She describes radical feminism as a kind of opposite to girl boss feminism. It's an inclusive feminism. It's a feminism which takes into account the intersectional nature of oppression, and it's more explicitly anti-capitalist. So throughout the book, Olufemi maps out a kind of intellectual framework for radical feminism. It's a feminism which is inclusive, and it's a feminism which acknowledges the intersectional nature of oppression. And something I wasn't expecting in this book, but which I found very interesting, was that she dedicates an entire chapter of the book, chapter 7, to art, and how art can be used to create a more feminist and a fairer society. I found this chapter really refreshing. She really nicely articulates a lot of problems that plague the art world, and she diagnoses them, and she offers really viable, really unpretentious, really doable solutions, and it all just makes a lot of sense. You read it and you're like, yes, why aren't we doing that? Why does it not work in this way? So the chapter starts with a description of 3 artworks which the writer believes exemplifies the artwork she'd like to see in the world. And the first one is Mona Hatoum's piece Roadworks, in which it's a performance piece. The artist is walking down the streets of Brixton barefoot, except that Doc Martens are tied to her feet by her laces and she's dragging them behind her. There's a really iconic photo of it, which I'll put here. And this piece was a response to the Brixton riots, which happened the same year, and to the rise of right-wing fascism. She then goes on to discuss Cecile Emeke's Flaneur series, where the artist makes short films documenting the lives of the African diaspora based outside of the UK and the US. So the most famous one's in France, and it's actually a really beautiful piece of art. I'll see if I can put a link in the description below, but what these artworks do is offer us access to a series of ideas and narratives and discussions which aren't immediately available to those of us who live in the English-speaking Western world. And the final piece that she mentions is Barbie Asante's Declaration of Independence, which is another performance-based artwork in which she invites a group of women, and that's women spelt with an X, to take part as collaborators and contributors, sharing stories based around the legacies of colonialism and slavery. So each of these artworks is performative. They're created by women of colour, there's a kind of focus on either creating or disrupting narratives, and they tell stories either verbally or visually. I thought all three artworks were really interesting. I didn't know a huge amount about them before I read this book, so it was great to learn more, and I'm gonna put links to all those artworks in the description below. The writer goes on to offer a really powerful, I would say fresh, it felt really fresh to me, set of ideas. I'd call it a manifesto, basically about how we can use art to create a fairer, more just, more feminist society. And I've picked out a few things from this chapter which really stood out to me. 4 points which I'll elaborate on here. So the first thing which Olufemi stated, which really stood out to me, was this idea that art is powerful, but not fully powerful. And artists can create narratives, they can disrupt narratives, they can change national and global conversations through what they do. And because that's a really powerful thing, we need to make sure that we're really asking ourselves and interrogating, who do we choose to exhibit? Who does this artwork center? What narratives does this artwork play into? What questions is this artwork asking? But at the same time as acknowledging this power that art has and this amazing influence that it possesses, she acknowledges that it would be completely foolish to believe that art alone could change the world, or that we can rely on art as a form of political activity in and of itself. We need to be doing politics outside of our art as well as in our art. And I think that's a really good point, because it is a bit utopian and it's a bit naive to think art can just change the world. But for whatever reason, that kind of romantic idea is around, it floats around. So the second point, which I pulled out of this essay, which I thought was really important, is this idea that the divide between politics and art is not real. So we're all creative, we all have the potential to become artists, we all have ideas and visions. However, the material conditions which dictate a lot of people's lives prevent them from becoming artists. So I've got a great quote here which says, "We must dismantle the systems of poverty, racism, incarceration and impoverishment which leave so many women unable to fulfill their creative potential." And Olufemi gives us the example of Khadija Say, the British Gambian photographer who exhibited in the 2017 Biennale and tragically later that year lost her life in the Grenfell Tower fire, illustrating the point that state neglect literally kills artists. Okay, so the next point which I pulled out of this essay is the idea that art for art's sake asks us to forget all about the context. It asks us to block out the world in which the artwork was made and instead to focus on the artwork itself. And that comes from a position of privilege, and it also kind of blunts the power of art to create social change. And this idea of art for art's sake kind of alludes to a kind of mysterious quality of art which is separate from political endeavour or the world that we live in. But quite often it's actually a disempowering belief for artists. It makes it harder for them to bring about social change, and it makes it easier for galleries and institutions and gatekeepers to keep art and life separate. So when we create art for art's sake, we're blunting our own knife. I've got a quote here which is, "Art is best utilised as a weapon." I love that metaphor, as art as a weapon. So the fourth point, which I pulled from this essay, which I felt was really relevant, is the importance of critique in order to take back control of the discussion away from the cultural gatekeepers, the galleries, the institutions, and creating a more democratic discourse around art. Olufemi cites the white pube as an example of a long tradition of working class women and women of colour using non-traditional media in order to take back that power over discourse and to bring issues such as race, class and gender back into the discussion about art. And again, I thought that was a really important point. I remember when I first came across the writings of the White Pube, I was actually working in the cafe of a really famous London gallery, and I would see these people every day. They were kind of like curators and gallerists, and I knew that they were the cultural gatekeepers. And I remember thinking that they weren't hugely inspirational people, and they were holding on to their power. They were always white men, and just on a personal level, they never said thank you when I served them their coffees. But I remember reading these kind of early pieces of writing by the White Pube and thinking, yes, please, like, it is so necessary that somebody take control of this conversation away from these people, even if it's subversive and the status quo remains, or the kind of institutions keep most of their power. The fact that there was antagonism taking place on this kind of online forum was just amazing. It really did kind of give me hope and inspire me at that time. So I really resonated with that point. And yeah, so to conclude, I'd really recommend this book. You can get it on Pluto Press. I'll bang the link in the description for that. And yeah, a big thanks to Silva for recommending and lending me the book. And yeah, in her introduction, she describes the point of theory as creating a blueprint for a better world. And throughout the book, and in particular in this 12-page chapter about art theory, Olufemi does just that. She diagnoses problems, she offers solutions, and she just verbalizes it and articulates it really well in a way which really resonated with me. And I haven't come across a lot of people who are able to write in that way. And she's not even a full-time writer about art. It's just part of a much larger essay. So that's really impressive, and I would recommend reading the whole book. So yeah, hit me in the comments if you've got any thoughts, and I'll be back soon with another one.